Welcome back to the Venomous Classic series, where we take a look back at retro StarCraft 2 games that have, simply put, got to be revisited for one reason or another. And the reason for this revisiting is right here in the bottom left. Dan Artosis Stemkowski, the best caster in the world, over there on the right side, hidden behind his computer monitor. And you must be thinking to yourself, well, gee, Artosis playing Zerg in StarCraft 2. What are these games? Where are these from? Some of the more astute old school fans notice the GOMTV.net logo in the top right and are probably aware of what's going on. That's right. These are old GSL games. Now, if you live under a rock or you are a player who subscribed to me because of my guide videos and you're still trying to figure out how to get out of Gold League and you're newer to the game and you don't know what a lot of these staple things are, let me explain. The GSL is the best tournament in the world. It's held in Korea on a yearly basis, and what I mean by that is it's held every year, but there are seasons of the GSL, so they take a few months to do a GSL, and the players have time to prepare for their opponents before each match, and it's full of the best Koreans in the world. Rarely will there ever be non-Koreans, aka foreigners. And this is one of those games where Artosis is facing off against one of the Korean pro gamers at the time who was good enough to qualify for GSL. And this is the round of 62, the first round, and Artosis is already down a game here in the best of 3. And he's elected to go for spawning pool first into gas, so probably a speedling expand here. Now, I will mention very briefly that the link of this video will be in the description, and God bless you if you could find it, because GOM really didn't make any effort to, I would say, properly sort these vids and put them in playlists and make sure that fans could find them. In fact, there are a lot of videos just missing. I'll give you an example. One of my personal favorite GSL games ever, the 2011 GSL Code S January round of 8 between Greg Fields, the American Macro Zerg, and Liquid Genro, Jonathan Walsh, the Swedish Macro Terran, who at the time was pioneering macro play, which of course anytime a foreigner, a non-Korean, can pioneer the metagame in StarCraft, it's a big deal. And it was he had a set of innovations and a set of different things he did regarding macro that Terrans to this day still use. So anytime someone can affect the metagame 8 years down the line like Genro did with his macro openers, it's something that should be noted. And frankly, the fact that GOM, their little YouTube channel, does not have this set of games, it's very frustrating. And it's part of why I do the Venomous Classic series, is I like to chronicle these old games, because a few months ago Husky StarCraft deleted his channel without warning for no reason. I suppose he had milked the last bit of fame and money he could out of it and said, screw it, I won't even warn any of my fans and let them make VODs of any old games they care about, and he just deleted his old channel. It's not really surprising for a guy who has not made a video in so long and didn't even bother with an explanation or a goodbye, but hey, it is what it is. The point is I really care about the game, especially a few specific players like Idra and Artosis, these legendary players that help shape my understanding of the game that I care about so much. So I wanted to be able to catalog these games and make sure that even if the channel goes down or they're deleted or they're improperly labeled and virtually lost within the sands of time, I don't want that to happen. I want there to be a backup. And I'm not trying to rip them off or anything, and the link is in the description. So now that that's out of the way, we can talk about Lost Temple in 2010. This is 2010, Wings of Liberty, it had just come out, this is the first ever GSL. Lost Temple, Metalopolis, Steps of War, Blistering Sands, Kulos Ravine, these were the maps in the pool. If you know anything about the game, which actually now that came out of my mouth sounds sort of like an absurd statement, if you were aware of how the game was back then, that's a better way to phrase it, you were aware of the fact that these are very bad maps for Zerg, whether because they have high grounds over natural, in the case of Lost Temple, which is the one that we're seeing right now, or Kulos Ravine, or they're extremely close, which we see like in Steps of War. It can be very bad for Zerg because the Zerg can be caught off guard with a quick attack. Now back in this time, queens were slower and had way shorter range. I'm not even going to go into how many times the queen has been buffed, but all you need to know is the queen was way worse defensively, range-wise, and it was in a position where you couldn't just make a lot of them for defense, and overlords were slower, and overlord speed was on layer tech, and it was just much harder to get in general for Zerg back then, so it was harder for Zerg to scout. What do I mean by that, if you're still sort of trying to figure out where I'm going with this? Well, on a short map like Lost Temple, it's hard for Artosis to scout because he can't just sacrifice an overlord because of the fact that in the early game you can't throw something away like that very cavalierly, and you're not even guaranteed to get scouting information. In this case, we have seen the player who's playing Protoss go for a 2 Stargate play. Now, he was threatening fake aggression earlier, and the point that I was getting at was there was really no surefire way for Artosis to know. The Protoss player could have thrown down 6 gates and attacked, but he actually did the opposite of that, he went for a very tech-heavy build after opening with the few sentries, and we can see this is Wings of Liberty. He did misclick there after being worried about a Link Flood and accidentally boot up a Guardian Shield. But hey, I've seen a lot of players do that. Artosis had to make multiple blind spine crawlers because it was close positions. He's elected to go for mutas here, and interestingly enough, you'll notice he's actually spread creep throughout all of his base and is even spreading it towards his opponent's base. And he's starting to attack with the mutas. Now, unfortunately, the blind counter here is out, these Phoenix. Now, most players didn't open with Phoenix. It was much more common to do like a robo opener or maybe even like a multiple gate opener with aggression and then expand. Artosis is just going to dive onto the probes here and try to get as much damage as he can done. Weirdly, Phoenix weren't as much of a hard counter to mutas because the Phoenix range upgrade did not exist at the time, but in terms of not really scouting Artosis and knowing what he was doing, Artosis got absolutely hard countered by the random 2-star Phoenix. Remember, Tempest and the infamous Oracle did not exist back in this time, so there was way less reason for you to ever go 2 Stargate Phoenix. Artosis was intelligently spreading creep on the corners of his base, but once he saw Phoenix, he should have pulled those back. That was sort of something that wasn't really common, prevalent, or even, like people didn't think about stuff like that back then. Back then, people were still having hatches on different keys or hopping around their bases with having a queen on each different hotkey, which is actually how Idra used his injects, but camera hotkeys weren't used as heavily. A lot of times people would click on each individual hatcheries and just rally stuff out. People would never hotkey eggs. The game was just a lot different, and frankly, everyone played a little bit worse, and the core macro mechanics for Zerg were still being figured out. Keep in mind, this isn't some game from 2012 where it's like Immortal All-In versus Infestors. No, this is 2010, the first GSL. The game had just come out, and this is the first round. The game had just come out of the box. Think about what an exceptionally exciting time this must have been to be a guy like Artosis who really cared about the game and was invested in it. Or even just someone who really liked RTS or really liked StarCraft 1. This was a great time in the game's history, despite the fact that the maps were sort of bad and hard for Zerg specifically. We can see here that this was close position, so not only did Artosis have to contend with the fact that a cliff drop was not only likely, but perhaps even probable, as a fungal goes down there ensnaring the Phoenix, but it doesn't really matter because they do bonus damage to light units, eviscerate the mutas, and now all Artosis has is queens. But the weakness of the cliff is very obvious. Zerg doesn't have a lot of options to aggress upon you from the cliff. It's really a one-way street. It's good for Toss against Zerg, and it's even better for Terran against Zerg. Against Terran, it was pretty much a de facto you were going to kill the natural with the tank or Thor drop. Protoss, it was still good. Artosis might have been thinking, okay, he's going to go for a robo and harass my natural. But regardless, it's something Zerg had to think about, and that's really the point I'm driving at here as Artosis' third base is scouted. The fact that the cliff is there, it's not like, oh, it means Zerg lost every time. It means that it was something big that Zerg had to worry about, and the other player could do a strategy that was heavily against or running counter to the strategy that the Zerg player thought they were going to do, like in this game. Perhaps Artosis thought it was going to be Robo Opener Cliff Drop, and in fact it was double Stargate Phoenix. We can see a Colossus is out here. Lings are coming out. Artosis does get a decent surround, but more force fields come down. There was no Ravager at the time, so if the Protoss was good at force fields, which as we see about twice as many force fields being used here as should have been, this guy, Next Free Saga, wasn't exactly MC. But the Colossus goes down here, or is at least not with the army. I think another one is out. Also observing at this time, it was pretty much like one idle tab for an extended period of time. And after a Phoenix opener was accomplished and executed, of course Colossus were gone into. This was a common follow-up as Artosis is going for speedlings into ultras. These speedlings, of course, had adrenal glands, something that was forgotten frequently. And did ultras crush force fields? Yes, they did. I didn't actually remember off the top, but here we see ultras crushing forward, and one Colossus is trying to be microed onto the high ground comically. Of course, the Colossus is not all that great against the ultra. You really need immortals because they do plus damage to armored. We can see if Artosis is going to be able to close this out, though. He doesn't have many infestors left. He has some Ling Ultra, and at this time Artosis was harping on this one big talking point he always had, which was extremely true and still is to this day, which is if you're ahead, get more ahead, which means don't throw your advantage away by attacking unnecessarily, and we're about to see, will he do that here? There wasn't much of a Sim City set up here with Ultras. It's pretty hard to hold because you can't use force fields. They'll just crush the force fields. Artosis is going to swing down into the natural with 4 Ultras. 4 Zealots are going to harass the third base for Artosis here. He will kill the natural. He'll kill a lot of probes. He'll continue to aggress onto the base of the Protoss player. And Artosis is looking very good because, of course, once you kill the natural, you're in a great spot. The third base is going to die here, so the Protoss player will not leave because the old adage, Zerg always has to be a base up. Now Zerg can't really defend that base. Now they're just a base up, so Artosis not as ahead as he was. You might be thinking, why doesn't he run over and defend that? Because frankly, he would never get there in time. And he's probably worried about a potential counterattack, and he wants to be able to threaten a counterattack of his own. He might even be worried about a potential warp prism. Remember, Artosis had been going to the trouble to spread creep all throughout his base. And that's something that we saw Zerg players would really neglect to do for a long time, even after him. He's getting a Hydra Den for the air. This was annoying for Zerg because Protoss players would open with Stargate. They figured out that was good, and that really limited Zerg because it was sort of like, oh, now I always have to worry about that little element. A base was attempted to be hidden by the Protoss player there. And if you didn't know, Greg Idra-Fields actually lost a tragic GSL game in 3 games. It was a best of 3. It was 1-1. He ended up losing it because he let a Protoss player hide a base on a map very similar to this one, Metalopolis. Same deal, where he was hiding it in the same location essentially across the way on a 4-player map, and Idra was so close to breaking him multiple times and just could never really do it, and it became one of those situations where it was like, okay, well I ran into him and he's not dead, so I'll just make some more units and go kill him. I'm too many bases ahead. Oh, he just barely held, and it's like, well, crap, he should be out of money. Oh, now he has an untenable, unkillable... He's in an untenable position where I can't kill him because he has Void Ray Colossus. And then Idra notices too late there was a hidden base. Peters out and dies. Artosis notices the potential hidden base. Speaking of hidden bases, Artosis didn't really open with a hidden base per se. His natural third base is covered by rocks and also overseen by the cliff. So it's sort of comedic what Zergs were expected to deal with. Think about that. if the normal third base on a map was like covered by rocks and also had a cliff overlooking it. Oh yeah, also your third base has a cliff, or your natural has the same cliff overlooking it. Protoss player is going down to try to harass the third base of Artosis. Artosis had made a spore earlier, and he did make Hydras for this very reason. Corruptors also would have been good because he knows Colossus are in play. Artosis is taking the map. The Protoss player has recovered and retaken his natural, but has he truly recovered? Not really. He's behind. Artosis is starting to run away with the game. This is the stereotypical Artosis macro Zerg, where he does a move that gets him an advantage and then he defends and expands and makes drones. This is sort of the bread and butter of macro Zerg. And even though Artosis plays Protoss now, for Zerg players back then, what him and Idra were doing, that was the script. If you were a foreigner Zerg player, that was what you based your play off of, was what they showed in their games on the Artosis Hour. When Artosis would do commentary on GSL and point out insightful things. Idra's stream. These are all extremely useful teaching tools. We can see Artosis is just flooding drones here at these corner bases. The Protoss player does not have DT tech, so he can't recover in that way. Back in this day, DT tech was actually way more expensive and more of a risk. Few lings being lost. Artosis might just attack here. With the Ultras, he doesn't have to worry as much about force fields. There's not even really sentries out. Ultras crushing forward here. Really what the Protoss player hopes for here is that Artosis just somehow throws away all of his Hydras and he makes Void Rays or something, but this is the quintessential Stim Koski saying, when you're ahead, get more ahead. And that's what Artosis did. He didn't throw. There's the Dark Shrine. It's 250, 250 back then, so off of 2 base, this is like an absolute Hail Mary for the Protoss player at Saga, Free Saga. Notice that Artosis, he didn't just throw away his Ultras into the natural there, because he knew, okay, I just need to be patient, reproduce, make a round of units, and go at him again. Meanwhile, he's flooding drones in the background, getting so far ahead. And he might not be that. Okay, there's the GG. So Artosis takes the game. That is the GSL victory for Artosis. There he is, playing on my insanity. One of my favorite players ever, and my favorite caster ever. Make sure you subscribe, and if you like StarCraft, leave me a nice comment and hit the like button.